Hello there, product people. Welcome to the show that supercharges your abilities to become better thinkers, makers, and leaders. I'm your host, Alsawi, and I'm thrilled to have you join me for this exciting episode of Product People. In this episode, we'll explore the journey of a product person transitioning from employee to founder. We'll discuss the various types and applications of product roadmaps, common pitfalls in product road mapping, how to navigate cost-sensitive environments, and the key indicators for assessing product maturity in organizations of all sizes. So if you're a product manager, designer, software engineer, or simply someone interested in understanding how product roadmaps can be used to reduce costs and drive faster revenue, you're in the right place. As always, you can expect an open conversation, valuable insights, and meaningful advice that can fuel your own journey with product, design, and leadership. Let's dive right in. Today, I'm joined by a product leader, successful founder, and SaaS expert. He founded and led product teams at 4 software companies, achieving 3 successful exits. He has served as a product manager at notable companies such as ESPN.com and MySpace, and has consulted for over a dozen other software companies. Currently, he's the co-founder of Savio, a product management platform backed by Tiny Seed, specifically designed for B2B SaaS. In this role, he has engaged hundreds of product managers to learn about their processes. Outside work, he enjoys playing tennis, lifting weights, reading, and spending time with his kids. Without further ado, let's welcome Kareem, Mayan to the Product People podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Alsawi. I'm excited to be here and have a chat today.
All right. Well, a good place to start is to hear your story with products. Can you take us through perhaps your journey? How did you start and how have you evolved to where you are today?
Yeah, for sure. So I have a degree in psychology and comp sci. Came to product from the technical side of the house. I taught myself to program on my Commodore 64, which is probably dating myself. During school, I had an internship at a company where I was in the product management group. They were a software company in the late 90s. I didn't know what product management was, but it was a summer job in tech, and so I was stoked to take it, and actually ended up building a feature request tool for their sales teams to log feature requests from prospects. And so that was my first exposure to product. Fast forwarding a bit, after college, I took a job where I was a programmer, but it was a very, very small company. It was a biotech company, and somebody had to wear the product hat. And so, often in smaller companies, a founder might wear the product hat, or the CTO might wear the product hat if there is no full-time PM. And so, that's where I started thinking in terms of, okay, I can build this stuff, but what does the user actually care about, and what is the business trying to accomplish? And so from there, I went to ESPN, which again was a producer role, which is sort of a hybrid dev/product role. And somewhere in there, in those first 2 jobs, I found a book by Joel Spolsky, who founded Trello and Stack Overflow, who I think was called something like Usability Testing for Developers. And that was like my first real grounding in, it's not just about, building the stuff. It's how does it work? And does it meet the customer's needs? What's the scenario they care about? And can we make the software in a way that's going to make it, work well? And so if fast forwarding from there, I went to MySpace and Fox Sports, and I started my first company in 2007, and I was head of product. So sort of in the formative years between that first internship in the late 90s and 2007, I still kept a technical background, and I still write code on some things today, but really moved towards caring about the customer experience and then aligning the customer experience with the business's needs. And so from 2007 to today, I've founded 4 companies and run product at all of them, and sort of evolved more into from a line product manager up to running teams and setting the product vision and strategy for larger teams.
Thank you for that. Tell me more about that experience transitioning from being an employee to being a first-time founder. How was that like as a product person?
Yeah, so interesting. I'll tell you the calculus that made me sort of take the plunge. So I was working for MySpace, making a good chunk of change, but it felt very like I wasn't learning and I wasn't really meeting a lot of people. I was sort of like a cube drone, and sort of depending on what you want to optimize for. If you want to climb the corporate ladder, I think I was actually in a great place, but I didn't really have a lot of interest in that. And so the calculus was, I was approached by a friend who was on the business side of the house. He needed somebody technical with product shops who could run, that side of the business to start a company. I was in a domain that I liked, education, cared about. And so the calculus was, well, I'll take more than a 50% pay cut, but if this thing dies in a year, in which scenario will I have learned more? have a broader network and be more valuable to a future employer if I need to go back to a job. And pretty conclusively, it was taking the startup path. And so, I went from a scenario where there were lots of resources, lots of people, to where, I had to figure it all out on my own. And I will say, like, part of the upside there is if you are willing to bet on your skills and ability to level up, doing an early stage thing is a great place to be. I was, 25, 27, something like that, 27, 28, when I left Fox to start EduFire, which is the first company. And so, you've got to figure it out, right? You're not told what to do by anybody. You don't have a boss who says, hey, we need the spec, for this, or you're going to be working on that feature, go talk with sales, it's all on you, how you prioritize your time. And so it was really about, going and talking to customers, or potential customers, figuring out, the sort of shape of the market, what were the problems that need to be solved. I mean, all the sort of line PM stuff, but you sort of do it with the sort of interesting part. The interesting challenge at that time was you do all the lower level stuff, but with a vision in mind, with a product vision in mind. So 5 years from now, what's the world going to look like? And how is consumer behavior going to change? And how are we going to fit into that so that we're well positioned to be part of the sort of macro trend in education. So it's really sort of the higher level. It's thinking about a lot of the higher level product vision, product strategy stuff, while also grounding it in customer research and evidence, and the real scenarios and problems that people had today. So yeah, it was also challenging in the sense that, like, you don't have resources, or not nearly as much, right? You also don't have a boss or people sort of constraining you. You can kind of do whatever you want, which can be a double-edged sword. So there's a whole host of challenges that transitioning from employee to founder that I had to deal with at the time.
Was there any doubt in your mind around this decision? Like, would you ever go back at some point and say, you know what, I was better off just working for someone as an employee in a big corporation? Or, like, how do you feel about this time when you first transitioned?
Yeah, I always knew that I would start something, and it felt like the right situation at the time to start something. And even looking back on it, I mean, it's led to all kinds of incredible opportunities, mindset shifts, cash, networking. Like, it's been a net win on many, many levels. It's been a net win, and it's been, a win on many levels. There's definitely been trade-offs, of course, as, sort of the art of product, right? Is figuring out what trade-offs you want to make. But looking back, it's definitely something that I would have done again, given sort of how things have turned out.
All right. Thank you. Now let's talk about road mapping. I know you have a unique perspective on product roadmaps. So before I go in with any assumptions, I just want to get your thoughts on product roadmaps. What do you think of them? When do you think they're useful, if at all? And how do you approach this topic of product roadmaps? How do you see them?
Yeah, for sure. So a roadmap really, in my mind, has two purposes. Or let me rephrase. There's two different kinds of roadmaps. There are roadmaps for communicating plans, and there are roadmaps for making plans. So the roadmaps for making plans, those are roadmaps that I build and use, but they're somewhat ephemeral, because especially at the early stages, and I mean, I'd honestly characterize early stage as anything up to Series B, right? Things are still very fluid. You still want to be reactive and responsive to market opportunities, and so you use a time horizon to plan the things that you're going to build, and you use that internally amongst the product team or the product and dev team. And I think those are highly, highly useful, but I think the time horizon on those is somewhat limited. The way we do things is we'll plan on a monthly cadence, and we'll have an idea of what we might do, next month, and then, the next, call it 3 months. So that's I find a useful time horizon where we're still quite nimble at Savio, and so we're able to react and respond quickly. If you're a bigger company, you have more people to coordinate. It's more challenging, and so your time horizon might be longer. It might be this quarter, next quarter, the second half of the year. I think those are useful time horizons or useful tools to plan. Communication roadmaps are different. So a roadmap, in my mind, used to communicate is you want to be very circumspect on the product side about what it is that you communicate and to whom, and so having a roadmap be the sort of source of truth where people can just go and access it is fine, but they need to understand, when I say they, I mean people in sales and CS, the executive team, they need to understand that the roadmap is subject to change. And so a communication roadmap, I'm usually the time horizon is, I like to keep the time horizon shorter, much shorter. Here's what we know we're going to commit to, and here are some things that we might commit to. down the road, but it's subject to change. And I think that the challenge with a communication roadmap is that people often will see it who are not part of the product team and then get upset when things change. And so expectation management for stakeholders is super, super important around roadmaps. And I'll give you an example as to why. Like when you look at AI, which has completely changed the software landscape in the last 2 years, if you'd had a roadmap 3 years ago talking about what things were going to look like in 2025, it would either be grossly out of date because you'd ignored AI if you'd stuck to what was on the roadmap, or it would have drastically changed. And so it's important to do the planning and it's important to communicate, but I think expectation management around the fact that the roadmap can and will change is really important on the communication side of the house.
I really like this categorization because it clears up a lot of questions that I personally had on this. So let's ask this question and assume that it applies for both types. Making plans, which is the first category, and then communicating plans. Given your experience, what are some of the common pitfalls? You spoke about some things like mismatch expectations. What are some other common pitfalls in product road mapping that you see, and what kind of negative impacts do they result in?
So great question. So I think there's three things. One is that the roadmap is a list of features that are not tied to business outcomes. There's sort of this idea of outcome-based roadmaps. Those are fine. However you want to structure it. I think the point is that product to me is the art and science of taking inputs, raw inputs, customer feedback, business goals, dev resources, technology, and then creating good business outcomes. Revenue going up, whether that's on the B2B SaaS side, whether that's new deal acquisition, whether it's increased expansion revenue, and on the flip side of that, lower churn. So I think one of the big pitfalls is having a roadmap that's a list of features that are not aligned with what the business is trying to accomplish. So if your business is trying to win new deals, expand into a market segment, the product team should build a roadmap that is aligned with building features that will win new deals. Flip side for lower churn, et cetera, et cetera. I think you get the idea. So that's one, roadmap that's not aligned with business outcomes. Another is, and this touches on what I was talking about before, which is having your stakeholders believe that the roadmap is the end goal. There's sort of two pieces of this. One is not communicating effectively that this is a thing that's going to change, like will almost certainly change. And then part of that is, product not understanding that the roadmap is not the end goal. It's an artifact of shipping, right? 5 years from now, people will care about the features you shipped, but nobody will care about the roadmap. There's sort of this idea on product side that we're shooting to build a great roadmap. No, what you're shooting to do is build features that are going to drive the business forward. And then on the, the sort of second half of that is product presenting the roadmap to the stakeholders and saying, this is the thing that we're gonna do. And then, those stakeholders not understanding that it's not about the roadmap, it's about the things that you build, and that the things you build are gonna shift based on the market, based on the world we live in. The third pitfall that a lot of folks make, and I've been as guilty of this as the next PM, is building what I call a roadmap and using data to justify their decisions rather than data to lead their decisions. And this is one of the reasons we started Savio, where we have all this product feedback from sales and customer success and conversations you have as a product leader or line PM. And those are nuggets of gold about what it is your customers want, and therefore what the problems are that your customers have, and therefore the kinds of things you can build for them to continue paying you money or pay you more money. And so a lot of PMs will make roadmaps where they choose the pet features that they want, and they cherry pick data to justify why they should build this feature and not that feature. And I think that's a huge mistake because, again, point number one is build things to move the business forward. So if you understand, what the business wants to do, and you understand what pain points your customers have in your ICP, for example, the customers are going to pay you a lot of money. You can use that data to build features that will align with good business outcomes. And so to me, the way you do that is by using the data to lead you to the right solution. It's not going to give you the right solution, right, or give you the right set of features to build. There's still a lot of work that comes in picking the right things. But the major pitfall is being data justified, not data led. So you build a roadmap and then you cherry pick the data to say, oh yeah, this is why we're building this and not that. So those are the three pitfalls.
I really like the one about data justified because I've seen it so many times. I've also seen it in language. People would say things like, what evidence do you have? So you're kind of digging out or coming up with evidence to support what you want to do. And it's kind of rooted in this bias that we have as humans, the confirmation bias, where we go out and we look for data to confirm what we already want to believe. Now, on a product person level, how might one get better at road mapping? Like, where do they start?
Great question. I mean, I'd say start at the beginning. And to me, all roadmaps start with customer evidence. So make sure that you have a system in place to gather up your customer evidence to be able to, at the very least, show a list of feature requests based on the number of accounts or number of users who want it, each feature that you can sort and filter. You then sort of more on a more sophisticated level, you would layer in things like deal revenue or active revenue. And so you could say, okay, show me the features show me this list of features sorted by total deal revenue for each feature, or a revenue that's at risk, or total active revenue. Let me see features only that our ICP cares about. So there's sort of a variety of ways to sort of become more sophisticated with that, but that's the place to start, right? And so you have your evidence, your sort of customer evidence database, which is what Savio does. But then, the second piece there is to understand what the business is trying to accomplish. When I was at ESPN was owned by Disney. And one of the bits of advice that the ESPN CEO gave us in an all hands was, look, like ESPN.com made, I don't know, $60 million a year. It was basically like a nothing burger in terms of Disney's revenue. And he said, look, the important thing here when you're doing your day job is to understand that what you're trying to accomplish, it should be aligned with what Disney wants. What are Disney's priorities? And how do you align your work with what Disney wants? And that was eye-opening at the time because, I'm like, oh, neat, I'm building fantasy football software. But, there's sort of a larger picture that fantasy football product fit into in terms of internet strategy. And then, I could sort of see that my work connected to that. And so if you're trying to get better at road mapping, have your database, have your customer evidence, understand what the business is trying to do, and then see where the Venn overlap is of those things. What are the things we could build today that are high leverage and valuable? So like easier to build and valuable, that overlaps with what the business wants to accomplish. Like it's honestly an exercise. If you have the evidence, it's an exercise you could do in, a couple of hours. It's really not brain surgery. And then I think the tricky part is figuring out, okay, of these 20 features that could all move the dial, which are the ones that fit in with the product vision, the product strategy, can be built in a sane and fast way if we build these 3 features versus those 3 features, right? That's sort of the trickier parts where you need some more acumen. But I think the root is really like have your evidence, understand what the business is trying to accomplish, and then just go to town on, overlapping or finding the overlap of those two pieces.
You said something that sometimes I hear a lot of conversations, perhaps controversy around, which is taking that statement around listening to your customers, which should not be controversial in any way. I think we would all agree that that's important. But I would say the understanding behind that. So you kind of have 2 schools of thoughts. You have a group saying, yes, I'm listening to my customers. Well, it means that I'm listening to their problems. I'm not listening to their solutions. I'm not listening to feature requests. They are not experts on solutions. They're experts at articulating their problem. And you have another group that says, no, I'm actually going to do what they need because if they are requesting a specific feature and there is a revenue outcome, why not? Why not give them what they want? Where do you stand on this, and what are your thoughts about this meaningful debate?
Hot button issue. So I think that good ideas can come from anywhere, and often customers are experts. I wouldn't even say customers are necessarily experts on their problems, but they can be. And I wouldn't necessarily say customers are experts on solutions, but they can be. And so if I'm talking to a customer and they say, look, I've got this problem, and I'm like, yeah, that problem sucks. You're right. Our software should do better at that. And they say, and our good solution will look like this, and I won't just take it and build it, but I'll think about it hard. And I've gotten great solutions from customers, from smart customers who get it. And if that solution aligns with where we want to take the product, we'll have no problem. Like I feel like it's, I don't know if I should say this out loud, but I feel like there's a lot of hubris in product management where product is like, I need to craft the perfect solution and I'm a young Steve Jobs and nobody else can do this job like I can. And I'm like, honestly, it's not true. Like there are lots of good PMs out there and you should really get over yourself and understand that there's good ideas come from anywhere. And there's no shame in fact, I'd say there's wisdom in stealing. Didn't Jobs say like great artists steal? Like if a customer gives you a solution, like you should should steal it and you should use it because it helps you. It's leverage, right? You need to apply some critical thinking and analysis to it. There's no shame in that. I think it's actually a smart thing to do. And, I'll speak from experience. Like I was more in the former camp. I always listened to customers, but I was like, they're dumb. They don't know they don't know what a good solution looks like. And, I'm 47 now. Times have changed. And I think that, I'm like, if there's a good solution that's coming from a customer, I will absolutely, use that as the basis for what my solution looks like. So yeah, I don't know. How do you feel about that? I'm curious.
I think I would agree with a lot of what you said. Don't take things blindly. Always examine, listen. I think apply that empathy and consider based on things. I think there's a missing sense of humbleness overall, which you kind of described in both design and in products. And I think that has to change. And at the end of the day, it's not about your methodology. Like nobody looks at a great product and says, "Oh, I bet they use this framework. It's so good." Like nobody cares about that. It's as a customer, you're really caring about the problem that you have, the need. Is it solved or not? I think we overestimate sometimes our craft on our need for perfection, and we think of ourselves a little bit too much, like you said. So I would agree to that. I find that in B2B, this idea of feature requests is more common, I'd say, because customers understand their business and they've been working probably with your software for some time. So I find that it kind of skews more in the B2B side of things. With consumer products, I don't see a lot of that. And if it is, it's usually, I would say, it's not great, but I wouldn't always ignore such requests, even on the B2C side.
You nailed something else that I think is important, the humility that a good product person should have. Like I see product as a conduit through which, problems and solutions flow. And it's not necessarily about the PM deciding what those things look like, but sometimes it is. But it's often about the PM curating this evidence and these solutions to form, an outcome that is productive for the business. One of the ways that I think a lot of PMs under-index on developing that, humility muscle is watching people use their software. Like when I was at ESPN, we hired a team to do some usability testing on our product. We thought it was great. It's the bee's knees fantasy football product. Had done really well, the year prior, and we were like, we could probably make some UX improvements. And one of the things that struck me, so we're behind, one-way glass, watching a moderator sit with a subject, and the subject is using our tool. They're signing up for our fantasy football tool, and it struck me how dumb we were because this guy, the first guy, he creates his fantasy football league, and he gets to the upgrade page, and this is a key moment in the life cycle of the customer and for the business. And it says something like, you should upgrade because you get a bunch of things. Like it wasn't that terrible marketing copy, but it was like maybe one step up from that terrible marketing copy. And it wasn't on the marketing team, it was on us. The product team had written the copy. And, he gets there and he's like, well, I upgraded last year, but this doesn't really tell me what I get. So I'm going to skip upgrading and play for free. And, that was the first guy, then the second guy, then the third guy, then the fourth guy. Like 6 out of 8, we're like, this isn't compelling. And I was like, oh man, we're idiots. Like we have so much to learn. And this feedback from customers is insanely helpful to, one, give them a better experience, and really experience how great the product is, and 2, drive the friggin' business for it. Because if people don't click that upgrade button, I'm going to be out of a job eventually, over years, right? So it was really that empathy for the customer and seeing the product through the customer's eyes really helped me develop that skill of humility early on in my career. And I think I was quite lucky to do that. I mean, I didn't latch on to the lesson maybe as early or quickly as I should have, or as fully as I should have, but it was highly effective at planting the seed that hey, dum-dum, you don't have all the answers. You should go understand what the customer experience is like and see how you can, learn from them to improve their experience and grow the business.
It's a very good story to share. Thank you. All right. We're going to take a short break. And when we're back, I'll ask you about working under pressure.
Sounds great.
And we'll go from there. Hey there, my amazing product people. If you're trying to find your own story with product, design, and leadership, gain a new perspective on being human in a soulless corporate world, and possibly have a good laugh in the process, you can grab your very own copy of my latest book, Product People, A Journal of Laughter and Tears. It's available on Amazon in all formats right now. Happy reading. All right, let's continue where we left off. Lately, many organizations have been creating pressure to cut costs. I wanted to get your perspective, given this environment that we are in, at least in North America. How do you think a product person should best operate in such an environment?
So I think the underlying assumption behind the question is, one, how do you keep your job and do well at it? So I think there's three things that I would think about here. So one is the point of the business is to make money, right? Is to serve customers to make money. And making money is the byproduct, but it's also the lifeblood of a company. So focus on revenue, align your efforts with revenue. And this goes back to, the stories about understanding what the company's goals are and then aligning what you do with that. So that's one. I think the second is focus on points of leverage. So AI has changed the game. It's a great example of leverage. And if you're not using it, you're probably working harder than you need to be at doing some of the things that could be done easier. So focus on points of leverage in your day-to-day work, but also in terms of the kinds of things that you build. So for example, what are the high impact, low effort features? That's a very simple example of leverage that every PM is familiar with. But focus more on those, right? Do more of that. The third thing is maybe not obvious, but have allies and make sure those allies in the business know what you're doing. And this is a bit of self-preservation. But if you are doing good things, I've seen lots of people, myself included, who aren't necessarily great marketers internally. And I don't mean to be over the top, but with respect to shouting from the rooftops about what it is you're doing. But if part of what you're trying to do is keep your job and be seen as a valuable contributor, if you focus on revenue, do your day-to-day and make decisions that are high leverage for you and for the business, and then have people throughout the business that know about those things and for whom you are doing favors for, right? Like one of the things that I think is under-indexed on sales and product, and sales and product and CS there always seem to be tension. Sales and CS want things from product, and product says, you guys are dum-dums and I'm going to go build, the things we know that our customers want. But the truth is that if you have friends in sales and CS, genuine friends, allies, you can use them to back channel. You can do favors for them, right? You could build them features because they make sense for the business, but they also make sense for the salesperson to hit their quota or for the CS person to drive net revenue retention. And so I think building those cross-functional, cross-departmental relationships is incredibly valuable. One, in terms of being a productive PM, but also two, in terms of being seen as a valuable contributor who, will understand the things that you're doing for them and understand the sort of contributions you're making to the business. So it's definitely a weird time we're living in right now. I'm not sure what is going to happen with Trump coming to power and what the impact of that will be for businesses. I'm guessing it'll be pro-business, but it's interesting times we're living in right now for sure.
Great tips. Aligning your efforts with revenue, focusing on points of leverage, and building allies and having allies in different parts of the organization. I wanted to ask you about product maturity. It's a topic that we kind of talk about. There's all kinds of assessments on it and so on. Just from your experience, and we can keep this high level, looking at organizations that you work with, tell me about your experience around that and what are some of those signs that you would see related to product maturity?
Man, that's a great question. That's a really, really good question. I've never been asked that one before. So I'll tell you a little story. So when I worked at ESPN, we brought in a team we participated in a study, and this study was really about describing the product capability maturity models of different organizations. And so they went to a bunch of different organizations. They studied what their product practices were, and they wrote basically a white paper for their business around, here's what an immature org looks like, and here's what a mature org looks like. And at the time, we were the immature org, which we didn't know, right? Part of the value of participating is to benchmark and see where you land. But we were the most immature product org that they looked at. And so when I go into an org, when I consult, I don't do a lot of consulting anymore, but when I consult on building product capabilities into an organization, some things I look for are, one, do you have customer evidence to support any product decisions you're going to make? So do you have a system that gets that feedback from sales and CS? And is it organizable and sortable and filterable? So that's one piece. One is, do you write specs? And I think there's this trend that I've seen towards not writing specs. Or requirements documents. It's around building like pixel perfect designs. And to me, that's an insanely immature simpler way of building products, because it's not just about the design. What happens when you click this button? Well, an email gets sent. Well, what's the content of the email, right? Like, you can't capture those things in a design. So understanding what the workflows are, writing them down, which roots out ambiguity. And it's much cheaper to change, a Google Doc or a wireframe than it is to give a dev pixel perfect design and then realize, during the implementation phase that, this design we didn't think through this in enough detail when it was cheap. And so now we have to think through it in lots of detail when it's expensive, when code is being written, when it's a developer's time, that's being wasted or spent revising or redoing things that we could have done more cheaply. So having your customer evidence, writing specs, having a product vision or product strategy. So like, the way I think about that is, what is the world going to look like in 5 years? How are our customers' lives going to change in terms of the problems that we're solving? And how are we going to be positioned well in order to be the solution or a viable solution that they would look for in 5 years, right? And then aligning the activities that the features that you build with that. Part of that is making sure that the business agrees with the product vision, right? The product vision should support the business vision. And so the fourth thing there would be, what we talked about earlier is, when you prioritize what it is you're going to build, are you aligning what you're going to build ultimately with what the business outcomes should be? And that should support the product vision. This feature should make sense in terms of where we think the product's going to be in 5 years. And that product vision should make sense in terms of where the business is going. But in the shorter term, sort of shorter time horizon, is this feature going to support a business outcome we're trying to achieve in the next 3 months, 6 months, a year? The last thing I would say is including, and this is maybe controversial, but is including dev and design earlier on in the requirements gathering phase. I find that it's super helpful to have devs and design contribute and be aware of what a good solution looks like. Product has to come to the table with that, but instead of handing it, writing it down and handing it over like, Moses coming down with the tablets to dev and say, build this, involving dev earlier in the process is super helpful, because dev can say, well, we can do it that way, but if you make these trade-offs over here, we could cut the dev build time from, a month down to, a couple of weeks. And so that comes back to leverage. And I think that's something that mature organizations do, is recognize that, it's not just about, the requirements or the wireframes, the designs, but it's actually about getting the product built, in an expedient and cost-effective manner, right? It might not be worth building if it's going to take 2 months of dev time, but it might be very much worth building if it's going to take 2 weeks of dev time. And so the question is, you can't make that calculation without the devs. So involving the devs earlier on in the requirements phase, where you can still cut and make trade-offs on the product side of the house to get a feature out the door sooner, can be, highly beneficial for the org. So, having your customer evidence, speccing, having a product vision that aligns with the business vision, making product prioritization decisions that align with a business outcome, and then including design and dev earlier on before requirements are finalized, so that you can build a solution that is higher ROI versus just, chucking the spec over the wall to the devs. I'd say those are the 5 signs. I'm sure there are more, but those are 5 signs that jump out at me as being indicators that you're working with a fairly mature product organization.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Do you think that people that come from a technical background or a design background, meaning that they were maybe a developer at some point, maybe a UX designer, and they come into products, have a different level of empathy in such conversations with their developers, with their designers? Do you think it impacts that, like your way into product or your career path into product management? Does that change your perspective on how to approach others and build relationships?
It's a good question. I can only speak for the PM by way of dev angle, because I don't have, I don't know what the other path looks like. I do think that if you approach it effectively, you can quickly build credibility with your dev team by showing that you're going to give them requirements documents and wireframes and be able to have higher bandwidth conversations about what implementation looks like. So you can be thoughtful in terms of implementation if you're more technical, right? You can say, look, let's not build it this way. Or my sense is, I'm not in the code, but my sense is this would be cheaper to build than this. So let's build it this way. What do you think? Right. And you can help sort of, by having empathy and having those conversations with them, you can build credibility quickly. I think the danger is, and I sort of stumbled over it earlier, but it's like saying you should build it this way, right? Like the product to me is like the why and the what. Here's why we're building it and here's what to build. And the dev is the how. And you can help them out with the how and be sensitive that, one way of building might be cheaper, easier than another. But I think the danger is straying too far into, being a PM who dictates how the thing is going to be built. And that's not your job as a PM. So yeah, I mean, I can't speak again to coming up from a non-technical side, but I do know that I feel like for me, being technical has been a large advantage in terms of quickly building rapport with the dev team and helping them do their jobs easier and understanding like what the crap parts of their jobs are. And, I sort of call it being a shit umbrella. Like sometimes, shielding them from a bunch of crap that comes from other stakeholders, other places, that is just my responsibility to deal with. And I can shield them so that they can just put their heads down and build the product that I've asked them to build.
I really like the point around the what and the why versus the how. And I think a lot of that respect for expertise gets lost, just forgetting that there is or a group of people with very unique skill set and expertise on your team. And how you respect it is by giving them the space to practice their craft to bring that together. So I always see the role of a product manager as an orchestrator of that expertise, not the other extreme, which is, someone with a hero complex. I've got all the answers. I got it all. You should do it this way. Here's the tech stack. Change this color. It's all about this one person, which I think is a recipe for disaster. But I've also seen it the other way around, where the devs or the engineers on the team either don't want to be involved in discovery and they think it's a waste of their time, where it's, figure out all things and just let us know when you're ready. And I've also seen situations where engineers are not content with the how. No, we want to build the things that we want to build.
Yes.
You have a roadmap, forget your roadmap. We have our own features because we think it's cool, and we're actually going to talk to stakeholders without even involving you as a product manager, and we're going to agree with them on things, which creates a lot of chaos.
Totally.
When the stakeholders are speaking to like different team members and they have all kinds of misexpectations. So I think there is a spectrum, is what I'm trying to say, of some of the points that you mentioned.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the, I look at product, your job is to understand what customers want. And if people are routing around you, one possible reason, I think one probable reason is that you're not conveying that what customers want and why. And to me, that's one of the reasons why customer evidence is so powerful.
Oh, 100%. I think there's an element of ego as well on all fronts, all different disciplines. I want to be doing something. I want to be the one that comes up with the idea, or I want to be the one presenting and so on. And I think this sense of ego and trying to put yourself first all the time creates all kinds of chaos, creates all kinds of negative outcomes. So it takes some wisdom, I would say, to flip this mindset around and think more as this orchestrator, this person that can, what did you call it? The umbrella, the shield?
Shit umbrella. Yeah. The poop umbrella. Let's go with a more G-rated term.
Exactly. I want to think of like, how would we call that person? The poop umbrella holder of sorts. Maybe that becomes part of the role.
You call it, you sort of think about it like an orchestrator. That resonates. I think I like basketball, so I think about it as like a point guard, where you might talk to your center or your forward about some post play or boxing out or whatever, but that's their job, right? Like they're the one who's down low and dunking or like trying to get the rebound or whatever, and you have some opinions on it. You might notice some details, but ultimately, to your point, like they're the expert on that. But if you're a good point guard, you enhance the play of the rest of your team and can help them, can guide them, can coach them even, and they can do that to you. But ultimately, you're not making those decisions; they are, and so you enhance them. But orchestrator definitely works well as well.
I think that's a great analogy. I want to move on to the current state of things. Now, there's a lot of product people out there grappling with the job market. Perhaps some of them are feeling overwhelmed by the constant news for the last, let's say, 2.5 years or so around layoffs. If you're in North America, I think Europe, this is also true. High cost of living is something that a lot of people have on their mind. And, I always ask for advice, like lessons. What would you offer them in terms of advice? How do you give them the right tools or mindset to think differently and navigate these challenges, given that they're in the product space?
Yeah, good question. I'd say first and foremost, don't listen to me because I'm not an expert. There's definitely some things I've noticed. So there's sort of two maxims here. One, spend less than you make. make. That's very obvious. Sometimes it's hard to do. It's easier if you make a lot more to spend less than you make. I was nomadic for 2 years, and I had a client in North America, and I lived out of a carry-on bag with a laptop. And obviously that's easier to do if you don't have kids and don't have, a partner. But my cost basis dropped substantially. I was on a podcast with Andrew Warner, who runs Mixergy, and he was like, well, how much did you make and how much did you spend? And I want to say I spent 25 grand living in Buenos Aires, in Budapest, in Melbourne, in New York. Like, your cost base would be quite low. And so on one hand, there's make more, but on the other hand, there's spend less. And so, like, as an example, we lived in Vancouver. We moved, which is a very high cost of living city. We moved to a city called Halifax, which is, I don't even know, 5,000 kilometers away. My geography might be off, but all the way on the other side of the country, Canada, which is the second biggest country in the world. So all the way from west to all the way east. And part of the reason we did that was because the cost basis here was substantially lower. And so, like, the art of product is making good trade-offs. And so, it's important to understand what trade-offs you're willing to make in order to have the kind of life you want to live. So spend less than you make, understand the kind of life you want to live, figure what trade-offs, can get you there. And I'd say the last thing is, honestly, like, I'm an optimist and I like personal responsibility, and the world is full of opportunities. So, if you're cash strapped, go to Upwork, go to A-Team. There's lots of possibilities for people to earn more, for product people to earn cash. You also have all the world's knowledge at your fingertips, and so few people go the extra mile to use that to make a difference. You can be one of them. Like, I have a friend who she was in Vancouver. She wanted to move to Germany. Her partner was there. He couldn't move to Canada at that time. She was applying for jobs and getting nothing. She comes over one day. She's like, oh, I applied for this job with this great company. It's in aviation, which I want to do. They're based in the States, but they have an office in Germany where I want to move to. And I was like, great. This is, I don't know, 2009 maybe. I was like, have you hit the hiring manager up on LinkedIn? She's like, no. And she was in sales, so reaching out to strangers was very comfortable to her. So I showed her, she was on LinkedIn, and I was like, oh, look, let's do some digging. Oh, here's the company name. Oh, that's probably the guy who, so she reaches out to the guy. He turns out he was the hiring manager, and she ended up getting the job. And I'm like, that took you 5 minutes. And how many people did that? Basically, probably zero, right? But put yourself forward in a channel, you reach out confidently in a channel where there's nobody else reaching out relative to, like, for that job, right? All the jobs go to jobs@company.com and you're, hey, I applied there, but also here. Like, we actually hired a marketing person for us. Same thing. Like, we put the job on Upwork. She's in Bulgaria. She's great. She found us on LinkedIn. She didn't even apply through Upwork. She just said, hey, I saw your job post. Here's what I do. Her experience is very relevant. Her outreach is very good. LinkedIn is, for us at the time, was a low message channel, low volume channel. So her message clearly stood out. She'd gone the extra mile. We ended up, giving her a hiring test. She did great. We hired her. She's been working with us for a year maybe at this point. And it's great. And so, like, it's very easy to go the extra mile if you just think a little bit creatively about how to do that. So I don't know. I'm an optimist. Things are definitely crappy now. I've seen cycles, right? I've seen crappy cycles. I've seen boom cycles. And so I know things are cyclical. And so, what was not good will soon be good, and then vice versa. So, but you've got to pay the bills and eat. But I think there's lots and lots of ways to do that if you have a little bit of motivation and can think, not very creatively, like mildly creatively, about how to deliver value, add value, and in exchange capture some of that.
Thanks for sharing. All right, on a more of a personal level, is there a specific cause, topic, or anything else on your mind that you're passionate about and would like to share it with our listeners?
Yeah, I'd say health and wellness. So I got an Oura Ring a few years ago. It's really, I don't know if you know what that is, but basically it's like a sleep tracker and fitness tracker. It just helps me. I use it for sleep tracking mostly. So broadly, there's a book called Outlive by Peter Attia, and he talks about fast death and slow death and how the medical system is very good at dealing with fast death. So, like, car crashes, gunshot wounds, things like that. These were sort of issues, 100 years ago. The medical system evolved to deal well with those. But most people today die of slow death. So cardiovascular disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, what's the other one? Diabetes. Anyways, there's 4 of them. And the medical system has not evolved well to deal with those because, if you die at 70 of a heart attack, it probably started when you were 30, 35. And so going back to the Oura Ring and sort of health and wellness, like just understanding what the key drivers are of a good, what they call health span. So, like, how long you are healthy for rather than lifespan, which is how long you're alive for. I want a good health span. And so, the tools in my toolkit today, and I'm always looking for more, are things like the Oura Ring, how well am I sleeping, exercising regularly, I got a DEXA scan recently, which is like a low dose x-ray, which measures your body fat and where your body fat is. I'm an Indian male, which means I have too much body fat around my middle, which is a terrible place to have it if you don't want to die of a heart attack. So, what gets measured gets improved. So I've now measured my body fat around my middle, and I'm able to understand, diet, make lifestyle, diet and exercise changes to improve that. But yeah, just in general, like we go around once, I'd like it to be a positive go around for as long as possible. And so understanding, and measuring sort of the baseline, key measurements that are indicators of good health span, and then that gives me an opportunity to understand how to improve them. So yeah, that's one thing I'm thinking a lot about lately.
I really like how you're bringing product thinking into your life. But you mentioned a couple of examples around moving, around looking at your own health and your wellness and applying a lot of the product sense that you already have. I don't see a lot of people doing that, so kudos to you on this. All right. So finally, for those interested in learning more about your work and connecting with you, how can they do so?
So Savio.io is the company that I run. We help product teams gather up all the product feedback they get from sales and CS, organize it, prioritize it using metrics pulled in from your CRM like revenue or other ICP data. That's one place. The other place is on LinkedIn. So I'm fairly active on LinkedIn there. But if you want to connect or DM me, yes. Feel free to do that. Would love to hear from folks in your audience.
All right, Kareem. This conversation was refreshing and insightful, and I want to say thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on the Product People podcast.
Yeah, happy to, man. This is a great conversation. Thanks so much for having me.
I want to express my gratitude to all our listeners. Your support means the world to me. If you found today's episode valuable, please hit subscribe, leave a review, or share this podcast with your friends. I also encourage you to share your feedback and your ideas on what topics you'd like to hear about next on this podcast. Your input is very important as it helps me learn and improve. Stay tuned for more exciting episodes, and until next time, stay courageous, creative, and compassionate. Take care.